Hello and welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0 on CAN TV. I am your host, Vaugh Bryant, bringing you relevant topics and the news from the week. We'll be right back with our first guest.
Children from our most vulnerable communities do not always have the chance to discover their potential and are often limited by circumstance, their environment, and systems beyond their control. This week on Change Agents, we will meet a leader and an organization who's using the power of music to empower our most vulnerable youth. Join me Thursday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV 19. Download the brand new CAN TV Plus app or stream us live on cantv.org.
My first guest is Andy Grimm. Andy covers courts and violence for the Chicago Sun-Times. He is a graduate of DePaul University and received a master's degree in journalism from the University of Illinois. Andy, welcome to the newsroom.
It's good to be here.
So you've been looking into commitment levels from the mayoral candidates around community violence intervention that supports public safety. What have you found?
Well, there's a sort of a range of positions here, and I think a lot of it is a lot of folks, given the high crime in the last couple of years, they've sort of turned their focus to opposing things that Mayor Lightfoot has endorsed. And Mayor Lightfoot has certainly made some of the biggest investments in community violence interruption and intervention that of any mayor. Some of those investments had started in 2016, as you well know. And they are now seeing several years of sustained high levels of investment. So the fate of those programs, which everyone says require, perhaps a decade to truly entrench the change in culture and build up the infrastructure of nonviolence in communities, is definitely on the ballot this time around.
So have any of the candidates come up with anything comprehensive in nature? Like what direction are they going?
They have been more or less comprehensive, but I would say the one consistent theme is almost everyone is advocating for hiring more police officers. Where somebody comes down as far as a really clearly articulated plan for what to do with community violence intervention is much less clearly articulated. I would say Chuy Garcia had come out with a bit of a plan, but the mayor says that he's cribbing a lot from him, continuing the investment in the nonviolence programs that you're familiar with that have developed around cognitive behavioral therapy, job training and education, and then sort of the interrupters model that sort of came online in Chicago in the early aughts. Now, so as far as candidates with specific plans, Jamal Green has a really expansive $5 billion plan that touches on just about everything. That would basically, I think, continue. He doesn't go into it because I think, again, it's a signature of the mayor's investment, but he does talk about some things that are non-police alternatives, paying young people, summer jobs programs, housing and affordable housing development and loans, basically building a more equitable community, which I think you could look at as a anti-violence intervention that's not police-based. But you'll also see a guy like Paul Vallis, who's got a program that is very much based on not only filling the vacant positions that have been vacant since the start of the pandemic, roughly 1,600 police officers, but also taking money from CTA's security budget to hire a further 700 officers, so 2,300 more police officers, which would be probably more than when Lightfoot took office. So, but there are certainly a range among the different candidates. I'd say Brandon Johnson has a program. He hasn't really been real clear on what his plans are. He's been coy about whether or not he would rehire, whether he would fill those vacant police positions. It's definitely the first time that I can remember in 20 years of covering Chicago area politics that anything other than hiring police officers has been on the menu for voters this year.
So you mentioned that the experts say, community violence intervention takes about 10 years to actually have an impact. We know right now it's sort of a hyper-local effort with smaller community-based organizations that are really heavily dependent on the ARPA dollars that are coming from the federal government through city, county, and state. So there's a cliff coming. So what would happen if that money goes away?
Well, at this point, Mayor Lightfoot, through staff folks that I have talked to about this very issue, have said that their intention is to use the ARPA dollars, and which essentially right now really only paying for half of the city's investment in the community-based intervention. So they're saying, we could probably find that extra 50% when the ARPA dollars go away. But it will take a commitment to find that additional funding. There's certainly been a ton of private sector investment, which is probably unprecedented in the city's history. And I think the number I have seen is that there's something like more than $100 million a year being spent combined between the city, state, county, and then like Chicago Cred, which is the Emerson Collective, is bankrolling. Ready Chicago, that has been getting entirely funded without help from the city, and of course Metropolitan Family Services and the CP4 pre-organizations that are everywhere. So, no one has said what they'll do without the ARPA dollars, but you could say that about a lot of city programming right now. So.
Yeah, that's true. So switching gears now, there's a recent lawsuit. Shooting victim Dakota Early is suing the Chicago Police Department. Tell me about that lawsuit.
Well, as you probably remember from the past few summers, we've had incidents where police officers have undertaken a foot chase of a suspect whom they believe to be armed. More or less dubiously, and then that suspect has been shot. This contributed to the chase involving Adam Toledo. This contributed to Anthony Alvarez, who was shot just a few weeks later. Again, these are folks running away from police officers, and they are shot. Many cities have adopted vehicle chase policies, acknowledging that there's a threat to public safety from high-speed chases, and that has also been basically the philosophy of the Chicago Police Department. The foot chase policy, which was basically the allegations of the lawsuit, the foot chase policy was dramatically changed and is discouraging officers from chasing anyone in any circumstance, essentially. That they've created a culture of fear, and so, but for that policy, someone might have given chase to an offender who shot Anthony Early. This offender, of course, was involved in multiple armed robberies and a carjacking in the days leading up to when he was shot. And so what they're saying is, had they given chase, they're saying he just wouldn't have been there to shoot Mr. Early. And it's interesting. The attorney for the Earlys. He has represented law enforcement officers in a variety of venues, mostly sheriff's officers. So they've definitely taken the tack that this is a policy that is depriving citizens of their safety and their rights to due process.
Last question. Sun-Times editorial board just published information on the city of Chicago providing mental health supports in all 77 neighborhoods. How much progress have we made on that?
Well, we're still a long way removed from when Mayor Rahm Emanuel shut down the community mental health clinics that were entirely city funded. This is a proposal that would, I think, target private sector folks providing those services. Any expansion of services is certainly, going to be important. But we have seen increased housing costs. We are seeing increased stress, economic pressures, all things that contribute to homelessness and mental health issues. Now, most of the candidates have spoken about the need to address mental health as an issue in fighting crime, having non-police intervention for these folks, but I'd still say we're probably pretty far off on meeting the needs that are out there.
Yeah, okay. Well, Andy, thank you for providing your insight and perspective, and we'll be right back with our roundtable discussion.
This week on In the Money, me and my guests, we talking about money and romantic relationships, how to build that so you have a strong foundation.
When you're in a serious relationship, I think it's okay to say, like, what's your credit score? Let me see it.
I had good credit.
Right.
So it was important to me that he also had good credit.
In the Money airs Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN-TV 19, cantv.org, and on the new CAN-TV Plus app.
A recent Chicago Sun-Times article cited a new study by the National Institute of Health found that the risk of men between the ages of 18 and 29 being shot to death in the 60624 zip code is higher than the death rate of U.S. soldiers who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. The study supports the need for the Sankofa Wellness Village, which was recently awarded the Pritzker Traubert Foundation Chicago Prize. The prize is a $10 million grant supporting an initiative to bring wellness, art, business, and other opportunities and services to the Madison-Pulaski corridor. Here to tell us more about the project are Kemena Brooks, Director of Development at Community Builders, Marshall Hatch, co-founder and Executive Director of the Ma'afa Redemption Project, and Ayesha Jaco, Executive Director of Westside united. Welcome to the Newsroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So Marshall, tell us about the coalition, how it came together, and why you chose Sankofa as the name.
So the name of the coalition is the Garfield Park Right to Wellness Collaborative.
Got you.
And it was actually spawned by the woeful data of life expectancy. So life expectancy gap between West Garfield Park and the Loop is now 13 years. I think when the study came out, it was 16 years.
Oh.
And so this collaborative was formed. The collaborative was formed to respond to that. Sankofa, as you know, is a West African, really a Ghanaian term from the Akan people. It comes from a principle which says it is not wrong to go back and get the things that have been lost, forgotten, or the things that have been stolen. So it's about retrieving the valuable wisdom from the past and moving into the future to create a better future for the coming generations. And so building on the rich history that West Garfield Park is, the residents, the legacy residents, many of whom are great migrators coming from the South, the rich organizing tradition of those like Al Raby and the Triple CO. Of course, that organization was the organization that invited Dr. King to move to Chicago in 1966. Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. walked the streets and inspired folks. And so building on all of that history, we believe that now is the time to not just respond to data, but to build the building blocks for a new West Garfield Park.
Gotcha. And Ayesha, tell us about the 13 years. What were the factors that led to such a huge disparity?
Sure. So as Marshall mentioned, it's a 13-year gap to date, and COVID is definitely a factor in that.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen across the West Side, we count the West Side as 10 zip codes or 10 communities, that in our Latinx communities like Little Village, there were 4 years lost in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that community in particular had a life expectancy that was closer to the Loop based on the data that we had at the time. And now for African Americans, the average is 70.
Mm-hmm.
So the key drivers beyond COVID are cardiometabolic disease. So grouped in there are things related to heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. Also, there's cancer as a driver, homicide, which folks think is a leading driver, but it's not, opioid overdose, infant mortality. So when we think about eradicating that gap, there are key measures associated to the social drivers. Mm-hmm. So you could put a health clinic on every corner on the West Side, but if you're not addressing the economic vitality of residents, mm-hmm. so their ability to attain wealth through their jobs, access to benefits, supporting businesses in the corridor that we're on, which hasn't been rebuilt in some cases since the riots in 1968, and then sustained riots in lieu of George Floyd in 2020. So for us, it's a holistic approach in addressing those key drivers by looking at also education, by looking at, yes, access to care, but also the access to food. Nutrition. So the village centers those sorts of supports to address the life expectancy, where Garfield Park has one of the lower ones on the West Side, along with North Lawndale, along with Austin. So our approach is really around centering resources, centering anchor institutions, working with the voice of the community to create a better quality of life.
Excellent. So, Kemena, tell us about how to create safe and affordable housing.
Yeah. So I'll start with answering a little bit about the community builders.
Excellent.
So the community builders, or also known as TCB, we are a mission-driven nonprofit real estate developer. Our bread and butter is in delivering mixed income housing and working with communities on community development efforts. Throughout Chicagoland, we've developed over the past 20 plus years over 2,000 units of mixed income and affordable housing. We also have done and delivered about 200,000 square feet of community amenities, neighborhood amenities, and retail. And our role in the overall village is the development of what's called the Sankofa Village Wellness Center. So we're the developer on the wellness center. But as Ayesha just mentioned, delivering a health clinic, delivering components within the health clinic is one piece, but it's also a need to provide affordable housing. So we, the community builders, has played just a small part in the overall corridor plan that was done by the community, led by the Garfield Park Right to Wellness Collaborative, to create a vision and a framework for Madison and Pulaski corridor. And part of that vision, which came from the community, was the desire and the need for affordable housing. So TCB and our capacity, as we look beyond phase 1, phase 2, to focus on, as we look into phase 2, the next step would be focusing on delivering affordable housing along important corridors within the community.
So would that mean rebuilding existing units or rehabbing existing units or building new units?
It could be a combination of both. So there is an opportunity to develop on vacant land, new rental, affordable housing, but there also is, there's statistics out there, I think we talked about it, it's about 25% of vacant homes in the neighborhood. And many of those are 2 flats, single families, 3 flats. So there is an opportunity with partners such as the collaborative and other local community partners in the community to look at how do we turn those vacant homes into homes that are owned by residents in the community.
The Myafa Redemption Project, how does you see this new initiative benefiting your existing work?
Well, it's a natural extension of it.
Okay.
The statistic that you cited to kind of lead this discussion, of course, talks about the high risk of young men, particularly in this zip code. And Myafa was created to respond to that risk as an initiative of New Mount Pilgrim Church, which has been in the neighborhood for 30 years, and it has, more than a dozen ministries. This is just one of them, but specifically designed for young Black and brown men to receive housing, workforce development, mental health support, the gamut. And the mission statement that they recite every day is, we are the men of the Myafa Redemption Project. We recognize that we cannot redeem our families and our communities until we first redeem ourselves. And then they say, therefore, our mission is to invest in the mind, body, and spirit so that we may repair and rebuild our city one life at a time. So built into the mission statement is, of course, a vision for not just self-development, but community development. And of course, to do it effectively, you can't have one without the other to really address the root causes of violence.
And so what do you see from the Myafa Arts and Activism Center? You're extending the work.
Yeah, so it's going to function as the headquarters of Myafa programming, but it'll also function as the arts hub of the neighborhood. I'm sure you know this, arts is one of the things that are first to go when it's time to slash budgets, particularly in schools. And so in West Garfield Park, again, building on this rich history of arts and activism. I know this is Black History Month and arts is right at the center. It's always been, and I think it will forever be. So it's gonna function in those 2 ways, but more importantly, build on what the church has done. The church inherited an old Catholic building. I think it was the former St. Male Holy Ghost, one of the largest Irish Catholic parishes in the city at one time. It inherited from the Archdiocese in 1993. A lot of the rose windows were caving in because it had been abandoned, and the church decided to invest in the building, to revive the building through the arts. And so the Myafa Center for Arts and Activism is going to build on that rich legacy and really promote the arts in all of its forms for residents young and old.
Excellent. And so what was the thinking behind the K Entrepreneurship Development Hub?
So the K, that is operated or will be operated by Project Forward and True Delta. And the idea was that those operators are residents. One working with Myafa, James or Jim, and having a place in construction and working to build capacity of the young men in the program, wanted to have a space in community that these young men could help resurrect, by helping to build it, per se, and then also in partnership with Kristen Freeman to develop a space where businesses within this corridor, right, that we are helping to revitalize, that they have access to resources. So it was born out of their vision and a spirit to localize some of their supports as residents and then as practitioners in their respective fields.
So you guys just won the Trobert Foundation Chicago Prize for $10 million. How important is it to support startup initiatives like this?
I think it's very important, seeing that we are the ones that we've been waiting on. This is a corridor that was not factored into Invest Southwest when you see investments across the city, given in some cases the lack of infrastructure, the lack of having a collaborative to be able to raise a flag and advocate for some of the needs. So we've arrived at this moment where there have been pockets. New Mount Pilgrim has been there for 3 decades. But what we've done is expanded their reach by bringing in other industries to say Garfield Park is here. The residents are resilient. They know what they need. They just need access to resources. So getting this is an amazing way to start that journey. And it's the law of attraction. So now that we have the prize, we are confident that we will get other supports. The city is standing beside us through the Department of Planning. So it'll be this multiplier effect that we think will jumpstart a lot of momentum in this region.
So you mentioned Invest Southwest. From your perspective at Community Builders, will the housing component of this be supported by the Invest Southwest initiative?
Well, it's currently still not a part of
Still
Invest
not, okay.
Southwest. However, as Ayesha said, the city, we're in conversations with our partners at the City of Chicago, and there has been RFQs or requests for qualifications, requests for proposals for development along the Madison corridor that are focused on bringing back a grocer. As you know, the Aldi closed, so bringing back a grocer, but also at a vision, looking at a vision that's a mixed-use concept with the commercial, with the grocer, with housing. So the city is certainly a partner with us along the Madison corridor, but also in the community. And there's other areas that we can look at along the corridor where the community has already invested, where the city has already invested. We've got the roller rink is one example. Pop Grove is another, around activation along this important corridor within West Garfield Park.
And so what are the next steps?
To keep working. Ayesha, I wanted to say amen as you were talking, because that's what it's all about. It's about lifting up the flag. It's also about planting the flag. West Garfield Park, I think since 2000, the turn of the century, has lost a quarter of its population. And we're familiar with what's been called the Black Exodus or the reverse Great Migration. We're familiar with what Mr. Cox at DPD has called, come back home. So this is a part of that movement. This is not just a renaissance of West Garfield Park, this is a renaissance of the West Side. And as my father, Pastor Hatch, said in response to hearing about this life expectancy data 6 years ago, the last shall be first. And so we're just grateful to be a part of this. This is something we can't really claim credit for. We're standing on a lot of shoulders. Very grateful just to be a part of this movement. That's going to mean a lot for the generations to come.
How long is it going to take? Like, what's the timeline for, sort of the ground? Well, I'm sure you broke ground, but like, when do you see yourself opening the center?
Well, I'll start with the Wellness Center. We're, we are in the process right now of raising additional funds, raising additional capital funds. So when we talk about ways to get involved, that's certainly one area, one effort. But the goal is to start construction on the Wellness Center by the end of this year, with the ribbon cutting, opening, accepting first patients in the clinic, seeing, residents on the fitness equipment in early quarter 2 of 2025. So we anticipate that the overall village vision will be delivered by 2025.
Okay. So in the meantime, between now raising the funds and actually doing the work, like, what are the partners working like? Do you meet on a regular basis? Like, what does the day-to-day look like?
We meet at least, I want to say almost every day. So there's a cadence, and we have different levels of governance, you know, from our community advisory group to those of us that are in the day-to-day. Our operators of the Wellness Center meet. We're convening with funders right now. So the real work has just begun, you know, in terms of us. We're locked in for at least the next 2.5 years.
And are there other partners that you still need to bring to the table, or do you feeling pretty set?
There's always room.
Yeah, I think the more the merrier.
Yeah.
For sure.
In any particular areas?
Having the Department of Planning is critical. When there are different levels, so having that sort of support around securing land, thinking about neighboring properties is critical. So there's some headwind there. We want to constantly engage community, and so that's always been embedded in the work, but we'll continue that. We want to think about just our other partner schools, you know, so I think it'll continuously evolve as we have more to bring to the table, because I envision every West Garfield Park elementary student should know about the programming from the MAC and should sign up for those classes. So there'll be a lot of connections in terms of recruitment when we're ready, and then folks that can help us with the sticks and bricks and other parts of getting it up and running.
Now, will there be green space around the center?
There will be green space actually incorporated into the center. Okay. We're looking at doing some type of green roof. We also are looking at doing outdoor spaces, balcony outdoor spaces on the center. You know, but as I've mentioned previously, is within walking distance. Actually, the roller rink is nearby on Madison, and Pop Grove is on the same side of Madison, nearby the Wellness Center. So the idea is that we would make use of all the assets in the community, and you know there's so many assets, as you mentioned, the school, the regional library. There are assets in the community that we want to tap into, including the beautiful Garfield Park as well.
So Kemena, Ayesha, Marshall, thank you for joining us on Chicago Newsroom 2.0. We hope you'll join us again. We'll be right back with the final thought.
I'm Melissa Donaldson, and on Generation Flex, we will explore the ABCs of education. Who has agency, and are the benefits worth the costs? The conversation is good, y'all.
I don't want my brain surgeon to be self-taught. But conversely, people say, how much formal education do you need?
Generation Flex airs Monday at 7 p.m. on CanTV 19, cantv.org, and streaming on the new CanTV Plus app.
Chicago poet Jay Ivey became the first Grammy Award winner for Best Spoken Word Poetry Album. He spent 6 years lobbying the committee for the category and became its first winner with his fourth album, The Poet Who Sat by the Door. Ivey says the music and the album all centered around hope and love and fighting for the betterment of our people. Did you know Young Chicago Authors is an organization that helps young people from all backgrounds to understand the importance of their own stories and those of others so that they can pursue the path they choose and work to make their communities more just and equitable? YCA also hosts the largest poetry festival in the world. The competition is called Rooted and Radical Youth Poetry Festival, formerly known as Louder Than a Bomb. It takes place March 15th and April 22nd. You often hear our youth need opportunities. Well, I can attest that Chicago is a city rich with opportunities. We just have to find them, participate, and elevate. I'll be right back here next week, amplifying community voices and analyzing the news that matters to Chicagoans. Until then, good night.